Chapter 2. A Pillow Fight. Hopping off their bicycles, Pete and Pam ran to where Zip was trying to shake the tin can from his tail. As Pete untied it, Pam bent down to hug her pet. "It's a shame," the girl said. "First Blackie and now you, Zip? I wish we knew who did it." "I'll bet it was Joey Brill," Pete guessed. "Who else would be so cruel to animals?" Joey was a boy Pete's age, who also lived in Shoreham. He had played several mean tricks on the Hollister children. Pete and Pam mounted their bicycles again, with the dog bounding along behind them. As the riders turned into their driveway, Holly and Ricky ran up to meet them. Pam told them about the tin can. "Dave Mead was here and gave us a clue," Ricky reported excitedly. "He saw Joey Brill tying a can to a dog's tail." "So he is the meanie," Pam exclaimed. "Somebody should tie a can to Joey," Ricky said angrily. "Maybe that would teach him a lesson." Pete snapped his fingers. "A swell idea. Come on, Ricky, let's do it." Together the boys ran to the garage, where Pete had seen 2 empty coffee cans and a piece of old clothesline. He quickly punched a hole in each can and ran the rope through them. "Are you really going to tie these on Joey?" Ricky asked, grinning in anticipation. "Sure thing. I think we'll need Dave Mead to help us." The brothers hurried down the street to Dave's house. They found him whittling a stick on the back porch. Dave clicked his knife shut and smiled when he heard the Hollisters' plan for playing a joke on Joey. "I'm all for it," he chuckled. "I saw him chasing a cat down by the lake a while ago." The boys began their search. But when they heard a cat yowling behind a clump of trees near the lake, it did not take them long to locate Joey. Carefully concealing themselves, they watched as the bully tried to tie a rusty can to the protesting animal. Pete stepped forward to confront the mean boy. Although Joey was only 12, he was taller and heavier than most boys his age. He often used his size to advantage in making life miserable for smaller children in the neighborhood. "Let that cat go," Pete said firmly. "Ha ha, says who?" Joey gloated. Pete did not reply. Instead, he gave the bully a hard shove, sending him head over heels and letting the cat free. As it raced up a tree, Joey sprang to his feet, fire in his eyes. "I'll get you for this," he shouted, lunging at Pete. But Pete Hollister was ready for him. Stepping aside, he tripped Joey, who fell flat on his face. Immediately, Pete gave a sharp whistle. Dave and Ricky rushed from their hiding places, and together the 3 boys held Joey down. "Hey, let me up! Get out of here! I'll call the police!" he shouted. The boys paid no attention. While Pete and Dave held him down, Ricky stretched the rope across the mean boy's back and tied each end of it to the top of his arms. Then they let him up. Joey tried desperately to shake the clanking tin cans off his back. When he could not do this, he wiggled and squirmed to loosen the knots. But Ricky and Dave had done a super job. "You won't get away with this," he shouted, running toward the street and making a fearful clackety-bang noise. By the time Joey reached the sidewalk, the clanking cans had attracted the attention of several other children. "Oh, look who has cans tied to him," they laughed. "Serves him right." As Joey ran on, even the grown-ups smiled. The boy grew more angry by the minute. The story spread quickly through Shoreham. When Mr. Hollister came home that evening, he said various customers had laughingly talked about it at the trading post. "We'll have to watch Joey," Pete remarked. "He probably will try to get square." Pete told his father about Indy Rhodes and the puppy they had returned to him. "Dad," said Pam, "couldn't you sell some of Indy's articles for him at the trading post?" "That's not a bad idea," Mr. Hollister replied slowly. "I believe people who come to my store might be interested." Mrs. Hollister thought so too. and it was decided that Pete and Pam should accompany their father to Indy's home after supper to talk to him about it. When they arrived, the Hollisters found the Indian playing with Blackie on the front lawn. Pam introduced her father, who explained what he had in mind. "I'd like very much to have you sell my Indian articles in your store," Indy said, inviting them into the house to look at them. What an attractive place it was. Besides some unusual-looking chairs and tables, the place was filled with Indian vases of many shapes and colors. Trinkets set with silver and turquoise lay about, together with brightly painted drums and small rugs of unusual designs. "These are very fine," Mr. Hollister said, examining them. It ended up with his giving Indy a big order, and both of them thanking the children for making the meeting possible. "If you would like more Yumathan articles at a real bargain," Indy said, "I know of a shop which is selling out." "Where is it?" "In my homeland," Indy continued. "Old Juan Deere, proprietor of the Chaparral, is in poor health and must retire. You should go out there and look it over, Mr. Hollister." Pam looked at him. "Perhaps the whole family could go," she broke in, hopefully. "We'd learn a lot about Indians." "And look for the Yumatan's lost mine," her brother exclaimed excitedly. "Have you any clues, Indy?" "Only one," Indy answered. "I once met a circus rider who was a Yumatan. He said he'd heard a legend that the lost mine was at Pilar Punta." "What's that?" Pete asked. "It's a high point of rock. I tried to locate it," Indy sighed, "but no luck. There are many pillars in my part of the country." Mr. Hollister said he would think over the Chaparral proposition. If he wanted to buy its contents, he would let Indy know. On the way home, Pete asked, "Dad, how about a trip out west to see Juan Deere's shop?" His father smiled. "Well, I might do it when Tinker gets back. He's been ill, you know." Tinker was the kind old man whom Mr. Hollister had engaged to work for him soon after they arrived in Shoreham. Tinker was a faithful employee, but right now he'd been out for a week. "I know what," Pam exclaimed. "Maybe Indy Rhodes could work at your store and help Tinker." "Not a bad idea," her father replied. He drove the station wagon into the driveway, and the children hopped out. When they told their brother and sisters there was a chance they might go to New Mexico and hunt for a turquoise mine at Pilar Punta, Ricky let out a whoop. "Swell!" he cried, and started to run around the dining room table. Then he knelt down and peered under it. "I'm looking for a turquoise mine," he shouted. "Who wants to come with me?" Holly and Sue joined in the game immediately and raced around the house, peeping into closets and cabinets. When Mrs. Hollister, all smiles, watched them play a while, she reminded the younger ones it was past their bedtime. While they were upstairs getting ready, Mr. Hollister sent a telegram to Juan Deere, asking the Indian for details about the articles he wished to sell. Up in his room, Ricky found it hard to settle down. Presently, he stood on his bed and picked up a pillow. Suddenly, he said to Pete, "Look out for me! I'm an Indian chief from Pillow Punta, and I'm on the warpath." With that, he threw the pillow and hit Pete squarely on the head. Pete retaliated by grabbing his own pillow, and in a few seconds the boys were carrying on a red-hot fight. When Holly heard the noise, she poked her head into the boys' bedroom. Seeing the fun, she went for Pam, and the two girls returned with their own pillows to join the battle. Wild whoops and yells filled the air. Sue, hearing the noise, brought a small pillow from her bed and tossed it at Ricky. "Goodness, what's going on?" thought Mrs. Hollister, and raced up the stairs. Just as she reached the doorway of the boys' room, Ricky picked up Sue's pillow and flung it with all his might. It hit the bedpost with a bang, splitting open and sending a shower of feathers around the room. "Now you've done it!" Pete shouted. "Stop, all of you!" Mrs. Hollister cried, and the children calmed down immediately. Oh dear, she said, looking at the split pillow. I've had that since I was a little girl. I hope it isn't ruined. Ricky went over and put an arm about his mother. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. I'll fix it for you. All I ask is that you clean up this mess, she said. Put the feathers in a pillowcase. I'll do the rest. Ricky obediently got a clean case and picked up the feathers, with the other children helping. The following morning, Pam was the first one awake. Shaking Holly by the shoulders, she whispered, Let's make up to Mother for that pillow fight last night. Sure, how will we do it? Holly asked. By cooking Sunday breakfast for her as a surprise, Pam replied. Okay. The girls hurriedly put on bathrobes and slippers and went to awaken their brothers. When they told the boys their plan, Pete and Ricky thought it a good idea. The children dressed quickly and tiptoed downstairs one by one. As Holly, who was last, walked past her parents' room, she paused. Suppose Mother and Dad should come down before the surprise was ready. I'll fix that, she decided. She quietly opened the door, removed the key, and locked it on the outside. Then, without making a sound, she scooted downstairs to the kitchen. 15 minutes later, Mr. and Mrs. Hollister awoke. The big house was strangely silent. I don't hear a sound, she said, glancing at the clock. It's late for Ricky to be asleep. Mr. Hollister said he would go and see if everything was all right. He strode across the room and grasped the doorknob. It turned, but the door did not open. Elaine, he said, we've been locked in.